"We need to make a child," the Apache woman whispered, and the cowboy went completely still. He had been riding alone for most of his life, or at least that was how it felt to him. The open land had always made more sense than towns full of noise and questions. The cowboy was not an old man, but the road had aged him in quiet ways. His face carried the calm of someone who had learned not to expect much. He worked hard, spoke little, and moved on whenever a place started to feel too familiar. That was how he survived, by not staying long enough to get attached. The land where this part of his story began was wide and unforgiving. Dry wind moved across the plains, brushing against rocks and low trees. The sky felt endless, stretching far beyond what the eye could see. He had taken a short-term job guiding cattle near the edge of Apache territory. It was honest work, and he did not ask many questions. He never did. All he cared about was finishing the job and moving on like always. The Apache people were careful around outsiders, and he knew that. He kept his distance at first, showing respect by not pushing himself where he was not invited. He camped where he was told, followed the rules given to him, and stayed quiet. He noticed how the land seemed different there, not just in shape, but in feeling. The ground felt older, as if it remembered things that people had forgotten. That was when he first noticed her. She was not loud or dramatic. She did not try to draw attention to herself. She moved with purpose, as if every step mattered. Her eyes were sharp but calm, always watching, always understanding more than she said. When she spoke, her voice was soft but firm. People listened to her, not because she demanded it, but because she carried herself with quiet strength. Their first interaction was brief. He was fixing a fence when she approached to deliver a message from her people. She told him where the cattle should not go and why. He listened, nodded, and thanked her. That was it. No long talk. No questions. Yet something about that simple moment stayed with him longer than he expected. In the days that followed, they crossed paths again and again. Sometimes it was early in the morning when the air was still cool. Other times it was near sunset, when the sky turned soft shades of orange and gold. Their exchanges remained short, respectful, and calm. He noticed how she never wasted words. She noticed how he never pretended to be someone he was not. The cowboy had learned long ago that words could complicate things. Silence was easier. But around her, the silence felt different. It did not feel empty. It felt shared. He began to learn about her world without being taught directly. He saw how she helped elders without being asked. He noticed how children followed her, trusting her presence. He observed the careful balance her people kept with the land. Nothing was taken without reason. Nothing was wasted. It made him think about his own life, about how often he had moved without purpose beyond survival. She, on the other hand, watched him quietly. Outsiders often came with loud opinions and careless behavior. He did not. He worked steadily, treated the land with care, and kept his promises. When he said he would do something, he did it. That mattered to her more than grand words ever could. One evening, a sudden storm rolled in faster than expected. The wind picked up, and the sky darkened. The cattle grew restless, and confusion spread quickly. Without hesitation, both of them moved to help. There was no time to discuss plans. They simply worked side by side, guiding the animals to safety, communicating with gestures and brief words. When the storm finally passed, the land felt quiet again, as if it were holding its breath. They stood there for a moment, catching their breath. The cowboy realized something then. For the first time in years, he did not feel alone. They did not talk about that moment, but it changed something between them. Trust, once earned, does not need to be announced. It simply exists. As days turned into weeks, small routines formed. They would share short conversations about the weather, the land, and the work ahead. Nothing personal, yet everything meaningful. The cowboy found himself looking forward to those moments, though he did not admit it to himself. He had learned to ignore such feelings, to treat them as temporary distractions. But this place was different. She was different. At night, sitting by his fire, he found his thoughts drifting toward her. He wondered about her life, her responsibilities, the weight she carried. He respected that weight. He knew better than to think of her as someone who needed saving or changing. She was strong in her own way, rooted deeply in her world. She too spent time thinking. She understood that paths rarely crossed without reason. Her people believed that meetings were not accidents. Every connection carried meaning, even if that meaning was not clear at first. She saw something steady in him, something rare, a man who did not try to take more than he gave. Still, she kept her distance. Feelings without purpose could bring trouble. She had learned that lesson early in life. The land itself seemed to watch them, quiet and patient. Seasons changed slowly, and with them came signs of difficulty. Resources were becoming harder to manage. The future felt uncertain. Decisions would soon need to be made, and not all of them would be easy. The cowboy sensed the tension, even if he did not fully understand it. He noticed how conversations among the Apache people grew more serious. He noticed the careful looks exchanged between elders. Something was coming, something important. Yet, for now, life continued in its steady rhythm. Work was done. Fires were lit, stories were shared among the tribe, though he remained an observer rather than a participant. He respected that boundary. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she stood beside him looking out over the land. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The silence was comfortable, familiar. Finally, she spoke a simple sentence about the changing season. He agreed. That was all. But inside, both of them felt it. A sense that this meeting, this shared time, was only the beginning. Something deeper was forming beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to rise. The cowboy did not know it yet, but his life was already shifting. And the Apache woman, steady and thoughtful, stood at the center of that change, not as a temptation or a mystery, but as a force shaped by history, responsibility, and quiet hope. The days after that quiet beginning did not change in loud or obvious ways, but something subtle had shifted. Life continued as before. Yet both of them felt more aware of each other's presence. The cowboy still woke before sunrise, checked the land, and followed the routine he had known for years. The Apache woman still carried her responsibilities with steady focus. But now, their paths crossed more often, and those moments felt heavier with meaning. They began working closer together, mostly because the situation required it. The land was growing drier, and careful planning was needed to protect what little remained. The cattle could not roam freely anymore, and the nearby water sources needed guarding. Decisions had to be made with care. The elders spoke quietly among themselves, weighing each choice. The cowboy was asked to help, not just as hired help, but as someone trusted to follow instructions without causing harm. He took that trust seriously. Each morning, the Apache woman explained where the land was strong and where it needed rest. She did not speak as someone giving orders. She spoke as someone sharing responsibility. He listened closely, memorizing every detail. He never argued or tried to offer clever ideas. He simply did what was asked, and he did it well. As they worked, small conversations began to grow naturally. She would point out signs in the land, how plants leaned toward water, or how animals avoided certain areas. He shared simple stories about his travels. Never dramatic, never exaggerated, just quiet moments from a life spent moving. He did not talk about pain or loss. He had learned to keep those things locked away. Still, she could sense them beneath his calm words. Trust does not come from grand promises. It comes from consistency. Day after day, he showed up, did his work, and respected the boundaries placed before him. That mattered deeply to her. Many outsiders spoke of respect but failed to live it. He did not speak much, but his actions carried weight. One afternoon, they were tasked with checking a distant water source together. The journey was long, and the sun was unforgiving. They rode side by side in silence for a while, listening to the sound of the wind and the steady movement of the horses. The silence was not uncomfortable. It felt natural, like something that did not need fixing. When they stopped to rest, she offered him water. It was a simple gesture, but it meant something. Sharing resources was not done lightly. He accepted it with gratitude and care, taking only what he needed. She noticed that. Everything about him suggested balance, not excess. As they continued, she spoke about her people's connection to the land, not as a lesson, but as a truth she carried daily. She explained how the land was not owned, but cared for, how every choice left a mark. He listened, truly listened, not just waiting for his turn to speak. That, too, built trust. By the time they returned, the day had left them tired but calm. A shared task completed, a shared understanding deepened. Word spread quietly among the Apache people. The outsider was different. He did not disrupt their ways. He did not bring trouble. He stayed where he belonged and did not try to be more than he was. Some elders watched him closely, cautious but not unkind. Trust, once broken in the past, was not easily repaired. Still, his behavior earned him time. The Apache woman felt the weight of attention on her as well. People noticed her closeness to him, though no one spoke openly about it. She carried herself carefully, aware that her choices affected more than just herself. Feelings were one thing. Responsibility was another. At night, she often sat near the fire, listening to the voices of her people. Stories of the past were shared, reminders of survival and loss. She thought about the future and the uncertainty that hung over it. Change was coming. She could feel it in the air, in the tension beneath everyday life. The cowboy in his own camp, felt a similar unease. He had lived through many changes, but this felt different. This place was not just another stop along the road. It had begun to settle into him, quietly, without asking permission. That frightened him more than he cared to admit. He told himself it was temporary. Everything always was. Yet, when he imagined leaving, something inside him resisted. He had not felt that before. One evening, a minor disagreement broke out among some younger members of the group over land use. Voices rose, frustration spilling out after weeks of quiet stress. The cowboy found himself standing nearby, unsure whether to step in or step back. Before he could decide, the Apache woman moved forward. She spoke calmly, not raising her voice. She acknowledged the fear beneath the anger. She reminded them of shared goals and the importance of patience. Slowly, the tension eased. No one felt defeated. Everyone felt heard. Leadership, he realized, did not need force. It needed understanding. Later, as the camp settled, he thanked her for what she had done. She simply nodded, saying it was her duty. He wanted to say more, to express how much he respected her strength, but words failed him. Instead, he helped clean the area, doing what he knew best. Days continued like this, filled with work, quiet moments, and growing awareness. They began to understand each other without explanation. When one spoke, the other listened. When silence fell, it was accepted, not feared. But beneath it all, pressure was building. Supplies were thinning. The season was shifting faster than expected. The elders began holding longer meetings, their expressions serious. Decisions that had been delayed could no longer wait. The Apache woman was included in those discussions, her voice valued. Each meeting left her more thoughtful, more weighed down. The cowboy noticed her change. She smiled less, spoke less. He did not ask questions, knowing some burdens were not his to carry. Still, he stayed close, offering support in small ways, fixing things before they broke, taking on extra tasks without complaint, being present. Presence, he learned, was its own kind of promise. One night, as the moon hung low, she joined him near his fire. This was unusual. She sat at a respectful distance, looking into the flames. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The fire cracked softly, sending sparks into the dark. Finally, she spoke about the future, about the need for careful choices. Her words were measured, thoughtful. He listened, nodding slowly. He did not interrupt. He did not offer easy answers. He simply shared the silence when her voice faded. In that moment, something deeper formed. Not romance, not yet, something stronger. A shared understanding that whatever came next would matter. The land around them remained quiet, holding its secrets close. But change was no longer a distant idea. It was approaching, steady, and unavoidable. Both of them felt it. The morning began like many others, calm on the surface but heavy underneath. The sun rose slowly, casting long shadows across the land. Birds moved quietly, and the air felt still, almost watchful. The cowboy woke early, as always, but his sleep had been restless. Something was changing. He could feel it, even if he could not explain why. The Apache woman was already awake, speaking softly with elders near the center of the camp. Her posture was steady, but her eyes showed the weight she carried. Important matters were being discussed now, matters that could no longer be delayed. The land was struggling. The people were strong, but strength alone was not enough without planning. The cowboy stayed back, respecting the distance. He focused on his work, repairing tools and checking supplies, but his attention kept drifting toward her. He noticed how often she paused, how her gaze lingered on the horizon. She was thinking deeply, measuring every word she spoke. Later that day, she approached him with a task. They were to travel to a nearby ridge to observe signs in the land and return before nightfall. It was a simple request, but the tone of her voice suggested more lay beneath it. He agreed without hesitation. The journey was quiet at first. The horses moved at an easy pace, their hooves pressing gently into the dry ground. The land stretched wide around them, open and honest. After a while, she spoke. She talked about the past, about how her people had survived difficult seasons before. They spoke of choices made by those who came before her, some wise, some costly. The cowboy listened closely, sensing that these words were not shared lightly. Then her voice softened. She spoke of the future, of how the community needed stability, strength, and continuity. She did not speak in dramatic terms. She spoke plainly, carefully. Each word was chosen with care, as if once spoken, it could not be taken back. They reached the ridge and stopped. From there, the land looked endless. Quiet. Honest. She dismounted and stood still for a long moment, breathing deeply. The cowboy followed, giving her space. Finally, she turned toward him. Her words came quietly, almost like a breath carried by the wind. She spoke of tradition, of responsibility, of hope. And then she said the sentence that changed everything. Her voice was steady, but the meaning behind it was heavy. It was not a request born from impulse or desire. It was rooted in survival and belief. The cowboy froze. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The wind slowed. The sounds of nature faded. Her words echoed in his mind, louder than any shout. He did not respond right away. He could not. He had faced danger before. He had faced loss. But this was different. This was not about survival in the moment. This was about shaping a future that would last beyond both of them. He turned away, looking out over the land, trying to steady his thoughts. Memories rose without warning. His past, long buried, pushed its way forward. Roads traveled alone. Choices made to avoid attachment. Promises never spoken because he feared breaking them. She watched him carefully, not pushing, not demanding. She understood the weight of what she had said. She had not expected an answer right away. Time passed in silence. The cowboy finally spoke, his voice low. He asked questions, not to challenge her, but to understand. He asked about meaning, about consequences, about what would be expected of him. She answered honestly. She did not soften the truth. She explained the responsibility involved, the respect required, the seriousness of the path she had mentioned. This was not a matter of convenience. It was a commitment that would change everything. He listened, nodding slowly. His heart felt heavy, torn between fear and respect. Part of him wanted to step back, to return to the life he knew. It would be easier, safer. But another part of him, quieter but stronger, recognized the honor in what she was saying. They returned to camp before sunset, the ride filled with thoughtful silence. Nothing more needed to be said for now. The question hung between them, unanswered but alive. That night, the cowboy sat alone by his fire. He stared into the flames, watching them rise and fall. His thoughts circled endlessly. He had always believed his life was meant to pass quietly, without leaving deep marks behind. Now he was being asked to do the opposite. Sleep did not come easily. The Apache woman also lay awake, listening to the sounds of her people resting. She felt the weight of her words pressing down on her chest. She had spoken with honesty and courage, but courage did not remove doubt. She wondered if she had asked too much, if she had misunderstood the path she believed was right. Morning arrived slowly. Over the next few days, they avoided being alone together. Not out of fear, but out of respect. This decision needed space. The elders noticed the shift, though no one spoke openly. The air felt heavier, filled with unspoken questions. The cowboy continued working, but his movements lacked their usual ease. He made mistakes, small ones, but noticeable. His mind was elsewhere. He watched the children playing near the camp, their laughter light and free. He thought about what it meant to protect something fragile, something growing. One afternoon, an elder approached him. The conversation was calm and respectful. The elder spoke about responsibility, about how some paths appear unexpectedly. He did not mention the woman directly, but the message was clear. Choices mattered. Silence, too, was a choice. That evening, the cowboy sought her out. They stood near the edge of the camp, the sky painted in soft colors as the sun began to fall. He spoke honestly, admitting his fear. He spoke of his past, carefully, without details, but with truth. He admitted he had never imagined a future tied to one place or one people. She listened without interruption. When he finished, she thanked him for his honesty. She told him she did not expect certainty, only respect, only thought. She reminded him that whatever decision he made would be accepted, as long as it came from understanding. That eased something inside him. Days passed. The question remained, but it no longer felt sharp. It felt heavy, thoughtful. He spent time helping more around the camp, learning quietly, observing traditions with care. He began to see not just the challenge, but the meaning behind it. The Apache woman noticed his efforts. She said nothing, but her eyes softened. Trust was growing, not through words, but through presence. The land, too, seemed to wait. By the end of that week, the cowboy knew one thing for certain. Whatever choice he made, he would not run from it. For the first time in his life, standing still felt more difficult than moving forward. The whisper that had stopped him had also awakened something long asleep. The days that followed felt slower, heavier, as if time itself had decided to move carefully. Nothing had been decided yet, but everything felt different. The question still stood between them, silent but powerful. It shaped every moment, every glance, every pause in conversation. The cowboy continued his work, but now his actions carried deeper thought. He paid closer attention to the ways of the people around him. He watched how decisions were made, how elders listened more than they spoke, how every choice was weighed against the future. He realized that this was not a world built on quick answers. It was built on patience. Inside him, fear and responsibility struggled quietly. He had always believed that staying unattached was the safest way to live. Moving on meant avoiding pain, avoiding failure. But now he understood that leaving also carried its own kind of loss. He had simply never allowed himself to feel it before. The Apache woman faced her own challenges. Some among her people began to ask careful questions. They did not accuse. They did not judge openly. But they watched. Tradition was important, and any step forward had to be taken with respect. She felt the weight of expectation pressing on her shoulders, yet she stood firm. At night, she often walked alone, thinking deeply. She questioned herself, not out of weakness, but out of responsibility. Had she spoken too soon? Had she trusted the right person? Her heart told her yes, but her mind demanded caution. The land itself seemed restless. Winds shifted without warning. Nights grew colder faster than expected. Signs of struggle appeared in small ways. Animals moving farther for water, plants drying earlier than usual. These changes added urgency to decisions that could no longer wait. One afternoon, a minor incident shook the calm of the camp. A supply run took longer than expected, and tension rose as daylight faded. The cowboy joined a small group to help guide them back safely. The task was simple, but the risk was real. When they returned late, tired but unharmed, the relief was visible. That moment reminded everyone how fragile stability could be. Later that evening, the cowboy and the Apache woman spoke privately. Their conversation was careful, respectful. He shared his growing understanding of what was at stake, not just for her, but for her people. He admitted that fear still lived in him, but it no longer ruled him completely. She listened closely, her expression calm but thoughtful. She told him that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to act with care despite it. She did not pressure him. She did not demand answers. But she made one thing clear. Whatever choice he made would shape more than just his own life. That truth stayed with him. As days passed, the elders called more meetings. The Apache woman was asked to speak more often, her voice trusted in times of uncertainty. The cowboy remained respectful, offering help when asked, staying silent when silence was needed. His presence became familiar, steady. Some began to see him differently now, no longer just an outsider doing a job, but someone willing to carry responsibility without seeking control. Still, doubts remained. One evening, an elder approached the Apache woman privately. The conversation was long and serious. The elder spoke of balance, of honoring the past while preparing for the future. He reminded her that traditions existed to protect, not to trap. Change, when guided by respect, did not erase history. She listened carefully, absorbing every word. That night, she and the cowboy met again under the open sky. The moonlight softened the land, making everything feel quieter, more honest. This time the silence between them did not feel heavy. It felt ready. The cowboy spoke first. He admitted that he had spent his life avoiding roots because he feared being responsible for more than himself. He admitted that staying meant risking failure, disappointment, and pain. But he also admitted that leaving now would feel like turning away from something meaningful. His voice was steady, but his words carried truth. She responded with equal honesty. She told him that the path she had spoken of was not about control or expectation. It was about trust, about shared responsibility, about believing in something beyond fear. She told him she did not see him as a solution, but as a partner in choice. They stood there for a long time, neither rushing the moment. In the days that followed, the cowboy took a step he had never taken before. He began to imagine a future not defined by movement, but by presence. He pictured staying through changing seasons, learning deeper meaning, accepting both joy and hardship. The idea frightened him, but it also brought an unexpected sense of calm. The Apache woman noticed the change in him. He asked more thoughtful questions now, not about tasks, but about values. He listened closely to stories of the past, not as entertainment, but as lessons. He began to understand that every tradition carried memory and care. Pressure continued to build around them. The season was turning fast. Supplies needed careful planning. Decisions could not be delayed much longer. The elders needed clarity. Finally, the cowboy requested a meeting. It was not dramatic. He did not make speeches or promises. He spoke simply, honestly, acknowledging his position as an outsider and the respect he held for the people and their ways. He said he was still learning, but he was willing to carry responsibility with care if trusted. The elders listened in silence. When the meeting ended, nothing was announced, but something had changed. The air felt different, less uncertain. That evening, the Apache woman found the cowboy near the edge of the camp. She thanked him for his courage, not in choosing, but in standing openly. She told him that whatever came next, he had already shown respected. They shared a quiet moment, watching the land settle into night. Conflict still remained. Fear had not vanished. Uncertainty still existed. But now, it was shared, not carried alone. The cowboy understood something important then. The hardest part was not the decision itself. It was accepting that staying meant allowing life to matter deeply. And for the first time, he was ready to let it. The path ahead was still unclear, filled with challenges and responsibility. But it no longer felt impossible. It felt real. The final days before the decision felt quiet, but not empty. The camp moved with careful purpose, as if everyone understood that something important was nearing its moment. The land was still the same, wide and honest, yet it felt different now. It felt aware. The cowboy woke before dawn one morning and stepped outside his shelter. The sky was pale, slowly filling with light. He breathed deeply, feeling the cool air settle in his chest. For years, mornings like this had meant one thing to him. Another day on the road, another step forward with no plan beyond survival. But this morning was not like the others. This morning asked something of him. He walked slowly through the camp, careful not to disturb anyone. Fires were low, their warmth fading into ash. He thought about all the places he had been and how none of them had ever asked him to stay. This place had not demanded it either. It had simply offered a reason. The Apache woman was already awake, sitting quietly near the elders. She looked calm, but inside she carried many thoughts. She knew the path ahead would not be easy, no matter what choice was made. She had learned long ago that responsibility did not end with one decision. It continued day after day in small actions. When their eyes met, there was no surprise, only understanding. Later that day, the elders gathered everyone for a final meeting. The air felt still, respectful. No one spoke loudly. This was not a moment for strong voices, but for careful listening. The cowboy stood slightly apart, not because he was pushed there, but because he chose to honor the space. An elder spoke first, reminding everyone of their shared history, of seasons survived and lessons learned. He spoke of balance, of how the future depended on choices made with care rather than fear. His words were steady, shaped by years of experience. Then the Apache woman spoke. She did not speak at length. She did not try to convince. She simply shared her belief in responsibility, trust, and preparation for what lay ahead. She spoke of honoring tradition while also accepting that the world continued to change. Her voice was calm, but strong. When she finished, silence followed. All eyes turned toward the cowboy. He took a breath and stepped forward. He did not raise his voice. He did not dress his words with confidence he did not feel. He spoke honestly, as he always had. He said that he had lived most of his life without roots because he believed it was the safest way to live. He said he had learned to leave before things could matter too much. But this place had taught him something new. It had shown him that meaning did not come from distance, but from presence. He acknowledged that he was not from their world and never would be in the same way. He did not ask to change their ways or to be placed above them. He said that if he stayed, it would be with respect, patience, and responsibility. He would continue to learn. He would listen more than he spoke. He would carry his share of the weight. When he finished, he stepped back. The silence returned, but it felt lighter now, as if something had been released. The elders spoke quietly among themselves. No one rushed them. Decisions like this were not meant to be hurried. Finally, one elder nodded slowly. The message was clear. The choice was accepted, not as an ending, but as a beginning. No celebration followed, no loud reaction, just a quiet shift in understanding. That evening, the cowboy and the Apache woman walked together at the edge of the land. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft colors. They did not speak at first. Words were not needed. When she finally spoke, she thanked him, not for agreeing, but for choosing with care. She told him that the future was never certain, but shared responsibility made it stronger. He nodded, understanding the truth in her words. Life did not suddenly become easier after that day. Challenges remained. The land still demanded patience. Resources still required careful use. But something important had changed. The future no longer felt empty or distant. It felt shaped by intention. The cowboy stayed. Sir learned slowly, respecting the pace set before him. He continued working, helping where needed, listening always. He did not try to take control or prove himself. He allowed trust to grow naturally, day by day. The Apache woman continued carrying her responsibilities, now with the knowledge that she was not carrying them alone. She remained thoughtful and steady, guiding with care. Together, they moved forward not as a storybook promise, but as a realistic partnership built on respect. The land shifted as it always did, sometimes generous, sometimes difficult. Through it all, the camp adapted, guided by shared effort. The cowboy became a familiar presence, no longer defined by his past movement, but by his steady place among them. Children grew. Elders shared stories. Work continued. Years later, when the cowboy thought back to the moment that had stopped him in his tracks, he understood its true meaning. It was not the words themselves that had changed his life. It was the responsibility behind them, the trust. The belief that one choice, made with care, could echo far beyond a single moment. He had once believed that staying still was dangerous. Now he knew the truth. Standing still, when done with purpose, could shape a future. And in the quiet rhythm of daily life, beneath the endless sky, that future continued, strong, thoughtful, and rooted in respect,